I'm good, y'all. Thank you.
So I guess the question is, how do we start? Do we do any introductory comments by the mayor, by board chair?
I was just going to call our meeting to order, and I was going to do a roll call and then turn it over to the commissioners and let them do their roll call.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, the webinar has started.
All right.
Madam Mayor, the
Good
floor is
evening.
yours.
Good evening and welcome to our joint special meeting with Hopewell Redevelopment and Housing Authority and City Council. I would like to call the meeting to order. Welcome all of the commissioners, our visitors, those are watching. And at this time, Ms. Best, if you would call roll for council.
Sure. Make sure I'm not on mute today. Madam Mayor,
Here.
Vice Mayor Parton,
Here.
Councilor Randolph. I think we said she wasn't going to be attending. Councilor Holloway.
Here.
Councilor Gore is running late unless she has already joined.
I'm here.
Oh, thank you, Councilor Gore. Councilor Denton. Councilor Denton.
Here.
Councilor Pelham.
Here.
You have a quorum, Madam Mayor. 7.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Thank
5
you.
to 2. You're welcome.
This is Chair Miss Flowers. If Mr. Benham, if you could call roll for us.
Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Gant, Commissioner Lewis, Commissioner Lewis,
Here.
Commissioner Bennett, Commissioner Temple,
Here.
Vice Chairman Tunstall,
Here.
Chairman Flowers.
Here.
Great.
Is there a motion to approve the set agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made by Vice Mayor Parton, seconded by Councilor Pelham. Discussion? I see no hands. Roll call.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
Councilor Randolph. I'm sorry, she's not here. Councilor Holloway,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Parton,
Yes.
Councilor Gore,
Yes.
Councilor Denton,
Yes.
Councilor Pelham.
Yes.
You have a quorum, Madam Mayor, 6-1.
So,
Do we need to do the same?
Yes, she should have to do the same. I don't know if she's having technical difficulties on her end, but yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lewis,
Yes.
Commissioner Temple,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Tunstall,
Yes.
Chairman Flowers.
Yes.
Thank you. I was talking into them. I was talking to them. It was muted, so I'm having the mute difficulty to this evening.
Okay.
Thank you, Counselor Gore. All right. So I'm going to just turn this over to HRHA. This is for the briefing for this evening.
Mr.
Mhm.
Benham?
Yes. Madam Chair, would you like to make a comment, or should I just go ahead and get into the agenda?
We can go ahead and get into the agenda. I
Okay.
have no comments.
All right. Let's see. Can the agenda be shared, or do I need to do that from my screen?
I can do that.
Yeah, I think you've got the nice copy of the agenda. I just have the draft agenda document that I put together. You have the one on letterhead.
Okay.
I can start talking while we're looking for to put that up on the screen. I think one of the first things that we had indicated we wanted to do is to at least establish some ground rules. And so the first thing I'd like to present is this notion about the length of the meeting, so that we can determine how long we're going to be at this. So we propose a 90-minute meeting time. In the event that we go beyond that, or there's a, I guess, tendency to go beyond that, we just actively table items and move them to a future meeting, so that we can kind of keep the discussion moving along. Is 90 minutes an acceptable time frame for these kind of meetings? I just think.
Which one of
generally
us are
operate-
the host? Which, are we hosting this meeting or you all? I can't remember.
Guess technically you're hosting it, since you set up the Zoom.
So therefore, it will fall within our rules, which is a 3-hour limit, but we can always cut it.
I'm fine with 90 minutes, Mr. Benham.
90 minutes sounds good.
All right. Okay. All right. That's good. So I think we'll do just really informal timekeeping. I think one of the other ground rules is that we'll be prepared to table items that we haven't reached consensus on or needs further discussion. And so we'll ensure that those things get tabled. Work really hard to stay focused on the agenda that we established, and we'll make a point of having an agenda as we go into each of these meetings. I think that there are future topics that need to be discussed that are not a part of the agenda. We need to identify those, put them on a pending list, and make sure that they show up for our next scheduled meeting. And in the absence of a true, I guess, parliamentarian to kind of make sure if we're straying into some gray areas, somebody's there to pull us back. So council may have someone who does that. It may be the city attorney. And, you know, I'm fine with that. If that's not the case, I think informally, it becomes up to the mayor and the chair to act as that parliamentarian and keep their respective groups in check. Any comments about that, or how we want to proceed, or the role of the parliamentarian.
I see Councilor Pelham's hand raised.
Is our lawyer on deck?
He's present.
I see her.
Yes, because I was gonna make a point of order. I don't know, since this is an official meeting and we decided that we're going against our rule of 3 hours, do we need to make a motion or we just do it by general consensus, Madam Attorney? First, I don't have a problem with the 90 minutes, but I think the record should reflect that that's what the motion should be, or if we don't have to make a motion, a general consensus. If she could rule on that first. And
Madam
then,
Mayor. Can I answer? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay. Mayor Bennett, may I respond? Is Mayor Bennett present?
I don't see her name listed, but if it's a point of
Okay,
information.
let me just, well, the point of order goes through the chairs, you know, Counselor Gore. But the rule that governs time limit is Rule 306. It does not require a meeting of 3 hours. It simply says there's a 3-hour limit. So anytime up to 3 hours is permissible. It doesn't require a vote to accept it or act on it at all.
thank you very much. Okay. And what was the next question you asked, Mr. Benham?
Concerning parliamentarian, who's going to fulfill that role?
I would
Is
say
that-
that's her job. I mean, that's her position with our meeting, so I'm sure it'll be the same here.
I mean, that's fine. Do we agree that that's it? Is the mayor back or?
I don't see the mayor on there.
She
I
just-
do
I-
see,
I'm sorry.
I do
It
see
popped
Councilor.
up.
I'm
Okay.
back up. I'm back up.
Okay.
Let's see. You see my screen?
Yes.
All right, awesome. Okay, so can somebody let me know what went on between the few minutes I was gone?
We just, we talked about some ground rules. We established what we thought were ground rules. Informal timekeeping, we want to keep the meeting to about 90 minutes. So we should be adjourning around 8 o'clock. We agreed that if the discussion goes too far on any particular subject, we agreed to table those items for a future meeting. Want to stay focused on the agenda, but if there are other issues that come up that need to be addressed, we'll identify those and put them on a pending list for a future meeting. And we wanted to identify the parliamentarian, whether that defaults to the city attorney, or is that a role to be shared by you and by our board chair? And I think the comments were that it would be the city attorney. That kind of catches you up.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
But I also saw another hand up, Madam Mayor. Councilor Gore had her hand.
Counselor Gore?
I hit it on accident. Thank you.
Okay.
Let's see.
Okay, so I think that's the ground rules, and we can actually get into the agenda. First item we want to talk about is the Piper Square redevelopment update. We are actively involved in the construction phase of this project, and so Ms. Tavares McCoy is going to lead you through an update for about 15 minutes or so, including your questions. So he'll give you about 10 minutes or so, and then we'll have about 5 minutes at the end of his presentation for any questions that you may have. Tavares?
Okay. Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. By way of update, of course, Piper Square has been, excuse me, in the development phase for a couple of years now. We actually have worked with several parties. The partners involved in the deal include Virginia Housing, also include the Federal Home Loan Bank of Atlanta, Virginia Community Capital, VCDC as the investor. The project was fully funded in the winter, and now it is under construction. In fact, as of this week, the first phase of what we're calling the first phase of construction is underway. The first 3 buildings have been cleared and are starting to be rehabilitated. Prior to that, the last 2 weeks we spent working with individual families to move them on site to temporary apartments to allow these 3 buildings to empty in order that construction can move forward. We anticipate that each phase, each set of buildings will take about 90 days. And there are 4 sets of buildings, which would put us out into this time next year. We're looking at this whole process would be completed by this time next year. For those who are not familiar with what is to take place at Piper Square, it is what we would call a substantial rehabilitation. The property will be dealt with its erosion issues and everything from the landscaping to just the grounds themselves. There will be new everything inside, new flooring, new cabinetry, new appliances, new lighting, new fixtures throughout. There will be some bathrooms added to the townhouse style, to some of the townhouse style apartments. And on the exterior, there will also be a new face put on the entire exterior. This includes new roofing, and one of the favorites of our residents is that there will be, this property did not have central air conditioning, and it now will. The air conditioning will be added to a new HVAC system, which will be energy efficient. The entire project will be very energy efficient, and we're excited about it. Residents are excited about it, and we're continuing to work with all the partners and the residents to make sure that it's a successful project. And yeah, I think that's my overview. That's kind of what's going on there. And now, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to respond to them.
Okay, I see Counselor Pelham. Counselor Pelham, your mic's muted.
We use acronyms. Can you tell us what the first one means? Like, what is VDCD?
VCDC is, yeah, VCDC, that's just the name they go by now. That used to stand for something. I'm told that now they just go by VCDC. They are an investor partner. You've heard us talk about using the housing tax credit program. VCDC is the partner who takes those credits and brings in the investors who turn those credits into money.
Thank you. You give us the timeline, so should be finished March of next year, 2020.
We're anticipating that, March, April, really, I just say second quarter of 2022, that the project will be completed.
2022. So they will leapfrog everyone that lives there now won't have to be relocated. They'll relocate on premises, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And will the rent go up, or how would that be structured?
For these families, the rent structure won't change. Similar to the way their rent was before, they will be paying 30%, or they will use 30% of their income towards housing costs. So that would include rent and utilities.
Rent and utilities, just like the voucher program, right?
Correct. The redevelopment moves the property from the public housing side to what we'll call the Section 8 side, or the voucher side that you'll be familiar with. Yes.
Okay. Will you still manage it?
Yes, Hopewell Redevelopment and Housing Authority will continue to manage. Hopewell Redevelopment and Housing Authority is also the managing member, and so basically is the controlling member of that property.
If a tenant has an issue, they will go through the manager on site and then come to who down in your headquarters area?
The manager on site is actually an employee of the housing authority. And so again, our processes will remain the same in terms of if there's a complaint or anything like that. We do have a complaint process that's managed by Ms. Pay, our chief operations officer.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Pelham. Councilor Gore?
Thank you. We've been talking about this project for several years. And so for those who are watching, can you just share briefly when this started so that way they can understand really realistically how long projects like these may take? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. That's a good segue. Really, I think we can just talk about this project officially started back in 2016, where we officially submitted notice to HUD, an application to HUD that we wanted to redevelop the property. We had started down a particular path using a rental assistance demonstration program, which the program is a different stream of funding than we ultimately went with. And there were several things that came up with all of these projects. There are always some challenges that surface. In this case, we witnessed I think 35-40% cost increase in the time between when we started the project and when it came time where we thought we would be under construction. This caused us to go back and reconsider the financing stack that it would take to complete the project. So we ultimately went with a program that's called Section 18 through HUD, which allowed us to again redevelop, which brought a little bit more funding to the project. And then you heard me mention some of the other partners that we had to solicit. Virginia Housing, which we used to refer to as Virginia Housing Development Authority. They were a significant partner because they gave us basically the mortgage that made the project feasible. But again, starting in 2016, and we finally closed all of the financing to move the project forward in December of 2020. So that's, quite a while.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do see if anyone's called in. Councilor Holloway, do you have any comments or questions?
I do not at the moment, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. All right. Back to you, Mr. Benham.
Let me get my mute straight. Okay. So the next item that we'd like to talk about is a general discussion of long-term housing issues, concerns in the community. And we don't have anything specific to present here, but it is an area that I think the city managers and some other and some commissioners have expressed some concerns about. And so we'd really like to just have a general conversation about these three items, these three sub-bullets of this topic. And we've got about 30 minutes to discuss it. And so I'll just sort of kick it off and hopefully generate some comments. So there has been a long-standing discussion since I've been in Hopewell about the overall quality of housing. The reason it impacts us in the Housing Authority, and we're really concerned about it, is that it impacts our ability to effectively deploy our housing choice vouchers. And in the event that we ever think about getting additional vouchers, one of the constraints that we always run up against is that we're having difficulty deploying what we have. We really are reluctant to even consider deploying or requesting any additional vouchers. I think over the years, we've had conversations about if we were to receive VASH vouchers, which are vouchers specifically for veterans, would that be a program we'd be willing to incorporate? And just recently, we were awarded some VASH vouchers, a very small number of vouchers, and so we could manage that number of vouchers. But if HUD and the Veterans Administration had decided that they wanted to assign substantially more vouchers to Hopewell, we would have been a little concerned about our ability to find quality housing for those veterans. Okay, and so that just kind of leads us to the on again, off again conversation that the city and the housing authority has had about the rental inspection program and how truly effective it is, or how effective it can be in ensuring that the quality of some of these housing are brought along to a slightly higher standard. So I'll open it up for your comments, discussion about that, or any of the other items that are under this bullet.
So what I would say, Steve, is one, the rental inspection program as it sits now needs some more teeth in it. And we're looking at what we can do to sharpen the teeth that are there now and add a few, because we know that there needs to be, I won't use the, we need to have more ability to have an enforcement effect on the program, as opposed to an inspection happens at no charge. Or so we need to look at that fee structure for it, how often it's done. When we originally proposed the program years ago, there was a discussion of we would do an inspection every time there was a turn of tenant. That becomes an almost impossible task, because we're not plugged into the rental agency community to know when that is happening. So we're looking at the program now. I think one of the questions for you in relationship to our program, but how that relates to what your standards are, because our standards are going to be meeting the minimum statewide unified building code, which may not be your standard. Your standard may be higher, and I don't know. So that's a point of conversation that we need to have, is if what our requirements are going to be versus what your or HUD's requirements are going to be to move people into housing, because we may be dealing with a standard and you're dealing with a higher standard, and our program isn't going to be able to address that. That then becomes a question of how do we educate the community, the rental community here, that there is an opportunity for a benefit. And in this case, and members of council have heard me say this before, not just from a voucher perspective, but we have a bunch of men and women over at Fort Lee that are looking for off-post housing that, in my opinion, if you made those investments in a house, you would have almost a guaranteed revenue stream from, and it doesn't matter if someone's here on a 6-month stint or a 12-month hitch or 18 months at the ordinance school, or if they're on post because they're at log U, you can have somebody, as long as that unit's getting that check mark from the housing office at Fort Lee, which is probably a higher standard than what our rental inspection program is going to be. But that's a motivating factor for a private investor, and I don't know why they wouldn't take advantage of that. Although probably the answer is today they're making money off of they're renting that house in the condition it is today. So what's the motivation for me to change that and invest any money? So we have to find a way to educate them and make that help make that change. So I think, we've got to have some conversation between some of your staff, Tavia, and probably Mr. Hawks, our building inspector, our official, about what our program can do, but what y'all's requirements are, to see how those things line up. Because they might be missing just a little bit, but we can see how that works. Mm-hmm. So, and beyond that, I guess our question would be, if there isn't any, available housing, would we consider, or would y'all consider just making the vouchers portable and letting people go where they want. If you want to live in Jacksonville, Florida, you can live in Jacksonville, Florida, but you're just managing a voucher because the availability of housing isn't here, or our property owners aren't willing to make those investments that would make that qualifying level. I certainly, like the idea of the veterans supported housing with Fort Lee here, and the ability and need to support our current military and those veterans and those that are transitioning to veteran status. Certainly would be something we should look at to strengthen our ties with Fort Lee.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some things there that I think we can talk about,
Right.
and where we could go.
Yeah. So just a couple of comments, and I know my members of the housing board have been vocal on this, so I'm hoping that I'll get some comments from them. But this is something that we've been talking about for years. I've been in Hopewell for 10 years, and I think we were talking about the rental inspection program when I got here 10 years ago. And so it's sort of one of these things that we talk about how long it takes to really do a redevelopment project, and it does take time. And I'm sure it really takes time to get an effective rental inspection program. But I think there has to be a level of commitment above what we've seen as a city in the past. And so I'm just kind of throwing out that as, really the gauntlet that says, I've been here 10 years and we've been talking about it for 10 years. And, to arrive at a point now where we're still saying there's investigation and other kind of things like that we need to do to make this program effective. I think it's more about the will to make this program effective, because, the logistics to merge and discuss any minor deviations between our program and standards and the state rental inspection standards, we can get through that pretty quickly. But at some point we have to make a commitment jointly that we're going to do something about it if we really want to improve the quality of housing. I'd like for other people to talk about that, because I'm going to circle back around and talk about that voucher, that portability question that you asked, because clearly there's an answer to that question. But I'd like to make sure we're able to talk a little bit more about the quality of housing before I address that portability question.
Commissioner Johnson has her hand raised. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. Good evening, council and commissioners. As I was listening to Mr. Altman speak, he brought up a really interesting point, and that is there may be a difference in our levels of standards. And then I thought to myself, well, who set these standards for the city? And can they be amended or adjusted so that we're closer? And I'm okay with him saying that maybe there's a team that will work together on this. Here's my issue. The city, HRHA, we have some commonalities here, and that is that we serve the citizens of Hopewell. And even before I sat on the board of commissioners for housing, I would go to the homes of some of these people who had vouchers and they were renting, and the houses were pretty much falling down. And so it's going to be really necessary that we move this inspection program along, whatever it is and whatever it takes, for the citizens of Hopewell who we serve and you all represent and serve. And you brought up mobile vouchers. That sort of disheartens me in that because we don't have quality housing, we would lose citizens of Hopewell. We would lose children that would attend our schools. We would lose potential income here because every person brings something to this city. So it disheartens me for us to just think that that could be the answer to get mobile vouchers, which I do agree that if we don't have quality housing here, at least at minimum, give the people a voucher to move elsewhere. But I've sat on boards and I've sat in meetings with the council where we're talking about how we bring residents to this city. How do we bring people to this city? So it disheartened me that we would think that our best answer is to get a mobile voucher so that people can leave the city. And yes, this is concerning. It's been concerning me for a while. We only have 11 by 11 square miles of land. And we must work together to change the conditions of these homes so that our residents, our citizens will have quality homes to live in. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Councillor Gore and then Councillor Pelham.
Thank you. So first I'll say, I do agree with Mr. Benham that this is a previous conversation. What I'll say for the record for, at least my constituents watching, I was a huge advocate of trying to get the Housing Authority to be a part of our strategic planning process in regards to the housing chapter, and to have that partnership, at least the last 2 years to try to get that established. But obviously due to political reasons from the parties that really wasn't done. There still is an opportunity to get that done because we still have not addressed that section in the strategic plan. So I'm going to do another shameless plug to say our strategic plan that has, we had one meeting, I don't even know if it was last year, and it was at the social services building. And that was to start that process. I've asked for joint meetings since then, but it never got the traction to be able to do that. So I will say again, the strategic plan where we have these goals already established by council for housing, the Housing Authority has its own goals and plans. We shouldn't be merging those topics and working together. Now, in regards to the rental inspection program, I talked to Mr. Altman today because I was asking where this come from, and I forgot that I've been asking Mr. Benham this question in regards to the vouchers. When we talked about the Davisville, Thomas Roth conversation, and I keep saying how come we can't give out vouchers, and the answer keeps going back to the rental properties. And then I always say, well, what are the guidelines for HUD? And I've asked for you to send that to me because we need to look at that with the rental inspection program. I will say that last year, council did, have work sessions regarding the rental inspection program once that was put on the agenda for us to revisit changing that, because it's just not so much the conditions for HUD, but the fact that we have to look at expanding this to the entire city. And then we had our attorney look into that. Ms. Griffin looked into that as well. So it's going to be a commitment from council to want to expand the rental inspection program, period. And then to give staff the additional tools, Ms. Griffin's office, to be able to run that program. I did ask for a rental inspection person in this past budget cycle. That wasn't supported. So when we're having these conversations, we have to look at if we're going to get the investment, if we're going to talk about this now, then look at this budget cycle to figure out, can we start to move the needle on getting the additional staff to do that? So I'll just say that I am in agreement that we have to look at the rental inspection program in general, but then also looking at these guidelines. And if there is a subcommittee created, which I am recommending, I would gladly be a part of that conversation and volunteer, because I do feel like this is needed. And I think the record reflects that I've been asking for something similar for some time. So I offer that. Then last thing I'll say is, and I hope not to ruffle any feathers, hopefully we can keep the conversation in regards to what we can do moving forward and make some commitments, and not go back and forth about property, because I'm gonna say this nicely, we can open up a whole can of worms going back and forth about properties. So on both sides of the aisle. So I would just say that, I offer this recommendation to say, I recommend that we create a subcommittee to look at both the strategic plan and specifically the rental inspection program. And if that is supportive by both bodies, I would love to volunteer to serve on that.
So who would you say has the action for making that happen? I mean, who would be the point person? Would that be the city manager? Would that be Tavia?
That would be city council. So this is a special meeting. I guess we can take a vote on it, but I'll defer to the attorney if we're, expected to take action. But since it's a special meeting, we can vote on stuff. And if she says yes, then I would make a motion to create a subcommittee to address those two things right now. So I have a point of information to the city attorney to see if that is possible. I believe it is, but someone double check.
Ms. Robinson?
Yes, ma'am. So there are a number of issues that are raised by your comments. So let me take a question at a time, Mayor Gore.
Yes.
So you mentioned creating a subcommittee. Those were the final words that I latched onto. Is there a committee already in place?
No.
Okay, so without a committee, there is no subcommittee. The committee will have.
Yeah.
For lawyers, this is the reality. You don't have a subcommittee if you don't have a committee.
Yes,
and according to your rules, you cannot create a committee except by resolution. So I don't think we're prepared to deal with all of that tonight. Certainly, council can signal their consensus to their desire to create a committee at a later point in time in conformance with their rules, but we can't go forward with creating anything tonight.
Correct. So I agree with you. So, and I should have restated that differently. You're absolutely correct. Meaning, is it possible to put a vote on the floor to say that council would direct staff to develop a resolution in partnership with the executive director of the Housing Authority to create a joint committee to address housing and the strategic plan and the rental inspection program? And if so, then that will give direction to start that work and then to bring it back to both bodies for a vote to approve it. Would that work?
That's a mouthful, but I'm going to go back a little ways and ask for some information, and maybe the city manager or you can help me in this regard. Now, when we were first discussing getting together with HRHA, I believe we used the terminology of just having work sessions, informal exchanges of information. That's how I remembered the scheduling of this particular gathering. I bring that up because council's rules deals with work sessions differently than they deal with special meetings. And if a work session is noticed as a special meeting, votes can be taken. So this might end up being a moot point, but I wanted to get some clarity as to whether are we in a true special meeting or we're in a quasi work session. Where are we with respect to what this gathering really?
Yeah. So you know what, Ms. Robinson, I understand the question and I don't want to hold this up. So how about this? I will find a way to put this on an agenda for council and work with the city manager and the executive director to try to make a recommend something to put on there for council to consider so we don't belabor this further. Would that be okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll just do that. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. There are hands up. I'll call them in order. Ms. Pelham, Ms. Johnson, Ms. Griffin, and then Mr. Altman.
Ms. Pelham, you're muted.
Your mic is muted.
Of course. I think like you were talking about us working together. I think it's essential, like when we have like now downtime, that the residents of housing especially learn the aspects of their rights to call people in when their houses are not up to par. say for instance, when they roach and mice infested and mold that we had in some of the even housing areas, that they need to be taught their rights. So we always have to refer them to legal aid. But if say something is that simple, that those people can become educated and well-versed on the Virginia laws of what housing says I don't have to tolerate, so they can take that knowledge with them wherever they go. And if we have substandard housing from landlords in the city, then they can act on that either as a group or as an individual to make the appropriate complaint where. No one always wants to deal with mold or whatever. The health department, it's like they get exempted from it, but the way I read the regulations, they are responsible, but who am I? So if you can do anything in that vein to get them trained or educated on their rights to carry things through when they're not, when they have an incident where their restroom or their bathroom is flooded, how to hold that landlord, including housing, including the city landlord, accountable. That's what we need to teach these people, our citizens. So that, I mean, that's the one thing I would hope that housing can do. And even the city can also do that for people who rent throughout the city, since we have such a large base of rental property. I guess that would come under Ms. Griffin's auspices as well. But if both of us do that, then I just would like to see a higher educated citizen to know what their rights are so they can hold us accountable. And that means, of course, calling in code doing their job to make whoever the landlord is do their job. So think about that. And I think that's all I have right now.
Thank you.
I know one of the questions you talked about the badge vouchers. Is that something that you can do or you planning on doing? I wrote that it's a program for veterans. Can you add that to your base of programs to get vouchers just for veterans?
We currently have badge vouchers.
Okay,
We
so
have 5.
and you're saying you can get more if we had available housing?
There's a potential to get more because every year there's an additional allocation made and we're allowed to apply. But we're just a little reluctant to apply given some of the issues we have with the quality of housing. But clearly, if we can address this housing quality issue, we'll be happy to go in for additional badge vouchers.
Okay, and so is there something, it can't be the whole, every landlord. Well, Tavia, Ms. Griffin speaks, can you speak to that to see, is there housing that we can set aside for more vouchers for veterans? I mean, if that's a program, it's sad that we can't do that in a maybe appropriate or set aside some houses that will meet the criteria. I don't know. Just speak on that when it gets to be your turn. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Griffin?
Yes, hi, good evening, everyone. There were several things that were said, and I think I just want to start with what I wrote down first. First, I don't know if everyone understands the rental inspection program. The rental inspection program is only active and only assigned to 2 areas in the city, and that is City Point and B Village. So the rental inspection program is not for the entire city. By the Code of Virginia, it cannot be for the entire city. We can increase the rental inspection areas, but at no time can the entire city be a rental inspection area. During the February 2020 City Council meeting, staff did present some solutions to restructure the rental inspection program. We're hoping that in this budget, we did request a position, and we'll see how that moves along. But the items that we were looking at is including
increasing inspection areas, increasing buildings that are added to the inspections, increasing the frequency of inspections, and reassessing the inspection fees, as Mr. Altman discussed earlier. I have a PowerPoint that we usually go over, and I'm not going to do that, of course, tonight, but I think it would be advantageous if the HRHA board and the city council were on the same page as far as what the rental inspection program can do and what it cannot do. And I think it would be also advantageous if we understand how HRHA factors in to the city's rental inspection program. So as Councilor Gore has said, that may be something that we may be able to discuss in the future. And I did also want to speak on the most latest strategic plan. We did meet with HRHA and did come up, I think we had 2 to 3 meetings with Mr. Benham and Mr. McCoy, Chris Ward, our senior planner, and we did come up with action steps for that housing chapter. I think we did that last year. And as you know, actually, I think it was January and February. And we had several things that you have been talking about tonight. Really, we had action steps and had some of those things getting done last year. As you all know, COVID is here. And so it put a dent in a lot of things that we had planned to do on last year. So hopefully we will be able to move forward and get those things done. I don't know if you know this, but as far as staff, we have been meeting with Mr. Benham for the past 5 years on a quarterly basis to talk about how we can partner together. Recently, those meetings have been weekly with Mr. McCoy and myself, talking strategically on how we can move things forward from a housing standpoint in the city. So we have that partnership, and I'm very happy that HRHA board and city council are talking here tonight. I think this is wonderful. And I think we have a lot of strategies that we have talked about as staff that we would like to bring back to the table to get things moving to improve our housing. And hopefully I've answered everything, and I probably gave you a little bit more than you asked for, but please let me know if there are any other questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Lewis? Ms. Shamika Lewis, your hand is raised.
She's muted.
She's muted. Commissioner.
Okay, I got it now.
Commissioner Lewis, we still can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, council and all the HRHA staff and commissioners. On this discussion that we had as commissioners with operation and our director was that I know my concern was that I have had some of the citizens to contact me in the past to reach out and say where they could not find housing to be able to pass the inspection, or they couldn't find housing at all. So not just one area. It was 2 different areas. And what happened is they were asked to get extensions. Oh, excuse me, y'all. To get extensions. And that being said, some of the time they may have had to not be able to get their voucher. So my concern was the length of time it takes to get the voucher, and then to run into this area where they end up not having to be able to get to get housing here in Hopewell. So that was my concern on my end. And I also had asked Mr. Benham how long had this had been in discussion, and he had just expressed that it had been for a lengthy time. So is it anyway, Mr. Altman and staff, do y'all think of, so we can kind of have a discussion after this of what we could be thinking about if we did want to suggest supporting some of the vouchers out?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, we certainly can have that conversation about that. And I think the key is understanding what the requirements of HUD are for those houses that have a voucher. Because to address one of the questions that Ms. Johnson asked earlier, the state sets the standard that we have to follow. We don't get to increase that standard locally. We have to follow what is in the Unified Statewide Building Code from a property maintenance perspective. So we have, and let's understand clearly, it is a minimum standard. It isn't the standard that we want. It's a minimum standard. So as long as the property owners meeting the minimum standard, that's all we can enforce. And that's why I asked the question about what may be the difference between that minimum standard and what HUD requires, because we may not be able to require property owners to get to that HUD standard. So that's where, the question of how is HRHA we welded into and tied into our rental inspection program. We have to figure that out. But I think, Ms. Lewis, to your point, and what I was trying to say earlier, if we can't get people to that point of qualifying for a voucher, house for a voucher here, then maybe the opportunity is to look at, well, can you port some of those to allow people? Because if you can't find a house here, we should be available and allow them to find suitable housing somewhere. Yes, we'll lose people, we'll lose children, but do we not have an obligation to make sure that they have a good place to stay? We can try to do that and work to do that here, but that's, again, that's where those differences in standards may come into play. And that's why we need to have that conversation about what they are. And probably the most appropriate person on our behalf would be Mr. Hawks, our building official, to look at those two things and have that be part of that conversation. Because that'll be critical if we can, from a rental inspection program, help elevate the status of homes and the quality of housing to where they qualify for the HUD standard. And even if they could qualify for Fort Lee, then, that's a great objective for us, but we just have to have that conversation. So yes, ma'am, we are absolutely willing to have a conversation, further conversations, whether that's, amongst staff or board members and counselors or a combination thereof. We absolutely are willing to do that.
Let me,
Thank you. Thank you, counsel.
Marcia, I'm going to go ahead and insert myself here. We're just about out of time for discussing this particular area. And I think what's come out of it is that we've agreed through some process to have some joint meetings to really start getting at the guts of this, and perhaps having it approved in some process on a city council agenda might give it more staying power. Because again, this has been an up and down, on again, hot, cold issue over several years, but somehow we can have it to have some staying power so we can really work through, address these issues, and make a decision as a city that this is our housing strategy and this is how we're going to execute those. I'm going to speak briefly to the voucher and their portability. It's not a preferred recommendation, but it purely answers the question: can the vouchers be made portable? And I may be speaking a little out of turn, but I think this is generally true, and Madeline, chime in if I'm not. We've got an administrative plan that talks about how we issue vouchers and for what amount of time that person who's issued the voucher has to stay in Hopewell before the voucher can be portable. That is largely based on the administrative plan that we have developed, that's been reviewed with our board and has been approved by the board. What informs that plan is the desire to keep vouchers in Hopewell for at least a minimal period, that first year, because of the money that's associated with those vouchers. So if we've got 170 to 200 landlords in Hopewell, which is about the number, it fluctuates. We've got that many landlords in Hopewell. That's revenue that passes straight through the housing authority directly to those landlords. The Housing Choice Voucher Program is a little over a $3 million program. And so when we start encouraging porting out these vouchers, then essentially we're talking about giving that money to Prince George, giving that money to Colonial Heights, giving that money to surrounding areas, as opposed to allowing that money to circulate in the city of Hopewell. So that's always been the driver for us. How do we keep the money in Hopewell? Because that's really what HUD does. You know, when money goes up and it's repurposed and it comes back down from the federal government, and it's assigned to a community in a variety of ways. And one way this money is assigned to Hopewell is through the Housing Authority. The intent is for that money to be used in the city of Hopewell. Now, if we go through this general discussion about housing issues and concerns, if at the end of that, we come to a decision and consensus that it's not important to Hopewell to hold on to those vouchers, then perhaps we do need to take a look at our administrative plan and say, look, it's just not the priority that we thought it was. And we can make adjustments as needed. So I think that's going to be a part of that big discussion that we've agreed to have. But
I would just say one of those factors that you have to look at, and you say there's 200 landlords, but of those, how many actually reside in Hopewell? Because if the rent payment is going to a landlord in Prince George, the likelihood is he's not spending money in Hopewell. If he's living in Colonial Heights, he's likely not spending money in Hopewell. So of that 200, how many are actually Hopewell resident property owner landlords? Because that money might get spent in Hopewell.
Yep. Good question. But, you know, the tenants stay in Hopewell. They spend money too. And I think as Commissioner Ruth was saying earlier, they go to school in Hopewell, they shop in Hopewell, they do a whole lot of other things that they do if they've got residents in Hopewell.
Right.
But again, as part of that conversation, we can talk about how many of the folks who are in our program are absentee landlords. You know, I recently scanned that list. There's quite a few of the landlords who live here in Hopewell. Quite a few of our landlords live here in Hopewell, but we do have some absentee landlords. So hopefully we can table any further discussion about this so we can stay true to our timeline. I want to make sure we talk a little bit about these redevelopment priorities. Is that okay with everybody?
No.
I see hands. There's hands up.
Yes, Counselor Gore, Counselor Pelham, and Miss Madeline Pay.
Yes. So, we don't have to go in depth, but I do want to hear what you were referring to with the homeless prevention strategy. And the reason being is because due to COVID, there's a lot of people in crisis in terms of housing. And I know Ms. Griffin works with our COVID funds for housing and rental assistance. So while we're all on the line, this might be another potential opportunity to add that to the list of a possible joint discussion with that future committee, if it ever is passed, that, another thing to put up there. So can you just give a brief understanding of what you're referring to with that so we can have some context?
Yeah, actually, it's a question to the city of Hopewell. Is there a homeless prevention strategy that the city has? And if so, how can we better accommodate the strategy that's already in place? And if there's not one, it's something that I think we need to work to address. So that's another issue that members of our board brought up, because in our conversation, they were saying it's very apparent there's a homelessness issue in Hopewell. And I think for many years, we didn't recognize it, intentionally didn't recognize it. But if there is a problem, if there is a strategy, we need to work together to kind of understand and implement that strategy. And if there's an expectation that the Housing Authority has a role to play in that strategy, we need to know what it is so that we can be more effective in supporting the city. That's really the context.
I'll just ask Mr. Altman if Ms. Griffin or him can just answer the question so they can have that walk away.
I would say Ms. Griffin handles, so if she wanted to comment on, because I know we're part of, I believe, a regional effort.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, hi. Hopefully you guys, I've unmuted myself. So as you know, we do have the warming shelter. We participate in the Creator Continuum of Care. And Mr. Benham knows what this is. It's a partnership in the community through the Creator area that focus on providing services for the homeless, providing shelter. The city recently partnered with Commonwealth Catholic Charities, and we partnered with them prior to COVID. They received money through our Community Development Block Grant Program and also through other funds to provide rapid rehousing for our homeless population. Currently, they are the partner that is receiving COVID CARES funding for rent, mortgage, and utility payments for those who have been behind due to losing a job or losing income due to the COVID pandemic. And also they are helping us with sheltering the homeless that have been on the streets and more susceptible to the COVID-19 virus. So at this point, they are providing help by putting homeless in hotels, area hotels in the city of Hopewell. I think there are a few. There's actually one in Chester. That is the hotel that we're using in Chester. And they're also working to help these people to get into permanent housing. We would need the housing authority's help. One question that came up is how could the housing authority partner with us? And Commonwealth Catholic Charities did ask if there was a priority placed on public housing for the homeless, and if we could partner with the housing authority in that way. This is a strategy that we're using thus far. When the COVID-19 pandemic is no longer an issue, we do know that that money will not be there. And so we would need to put something in place that could provide the same type of support. The Commonwealth Catholic Charities program also does wraparound services. So this is just not to have them, this population in a hotel for this small time, and when the pandemic is over, then they have to leave and they still are, go back to where they were before. The idea is to get them into permanent public housing. So we're using continuum of care funding, CARES funding, and also CDBG funding to make sure that that happens. I would say that at this point, I feel that this is a strategy that we've been using due to the pandemic, but I feel that the city needs to look in depth at a strategy outside of the pandemic. What will we do for our homeless population on a continual basis after the pandemic is over? And I think that is something that we should be discussing, and also an opportunity for the housing authority to partner with the city. Thank you.
Councilor Pelham?
Yeah, with that, Mr. Benham, can you provide us an updated list of all the landlords that have property through the voucher program with the addresses that they rent to?
We provide that list to Department of Development. I'm not sure if we provide you a list of the landlords, and not really sure if we're going to be able to do that, the list of landlords, but we can give you the addresses.
Yeah, that's what I said. Give the list of the landlords and the address of their properties that they rent through the voucher program. Not the name, just the addresses. That's public information, right?
Councilor Pelham, I do have that information. The Department of Development has that information. So if that's something that the council would like to see, I can forward that to you.
So the landlord's name and each property that he has a voucher for his address, correct?
I have the addresses.
Have the addresses.
I have
the landlord that belongs to that rents for that address.
That's easily, I can find that out easily with the addresses, ma'am. Yes.
So that's what I would like. I guess the other councilors, if they want it to send it to all of us. If they don't want it, they can discard it or say they don't want it now. Thank you. Because I mean, if you have that list of landlords, it would seem like again, educating that tenant don't have to live in a dilapidated place if they know they can call in code and get that either safety or whatever issue is going on in that apartment or house. They just don't know. We got to educate them before they move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Madeline Pay.
Good evening. Just wanted to chime in on
You're muffled. We can't hear you, Ms. Pay.
Can you hear me now?
A little bit. You're going.
Let's see if I can get it. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I just want to pull up a little closer. So one of the things I'd say we also want to be mindful of is that the Housing Authority has a requirement to meet local housing needs. And so one of our concerns, and we have to report out on this to HUD annually in our PHA plan. So one of the things we want to be mindful of is that if we start to, or we make this transition of porting out vouchers, then essentially, we're no longer meeting the local housing needs. We're transitioning to really more of a focus on meeting, the surrounding localities' housing needs. And of course, what we always see, there's always an interest in living in Richmond. And so essentially, Richmond will get that influx of vouchers and absorb those vouchers most of the time. So I would say definitely we want to be careful with that sort of mode of thinking, because the Housing Authority does have a mandate to meet the local housing needs. And then two, I would say also, and I'm not in front of all the information about the landlords, but I would think that out of the 142 landlords that we have in the program, that there are quite a few that are local to Hopewell. And if we make that transition where we're doing mostly port outs, there'll be an indirect sort of challenges with the landlords in Hopewell. And then I say that the third thing is also one of the things that we find is that the voucher is a hot commodity. So anytime you open a window, we start to become a housing authority, allowing folks to immediately pour out. Then we're going to find that people will be drawn to the housing authority solely for the purpose, of getting on waiting lists and immediately, porting out. And what we have in place really, prohibits folks from doing that. And in some cases, folks end up, using that year and found that they like Hopewell and they stay. So I would say, look, we just want to be careful of how we proceed with that recommendation.
Thank you.
So let me just quickly, Madeline, I think hopefully we can hear you a little bit better the second time through. Speak a little bit to how we have legal aid involved in the briefings involving our tenants, both in the voucher program and if not already in the public housing program. So this idea of them being educated about what their rights are, just speak to what we're already doing.
Absolutely. So probably about maybe a year ago now, year and a half ago, when we started seeing a lot of the changes, particularly around protection around source of income, which is huge for the program. And essentially it says that landlords cannot discriminate based on source of income. We decided this was a good time to converse with the legal aid on how we could help educate our applicants on their rights, not just on that particular new law, but the series of new laws that were enacted, and also generally helping them with their rights on how to file formal complaints. And they, in the PowerPoint that they cover when they come to their briefings, they cover our process, but also how they get in touch with legal aid, the process of, going to court, and all the steps involved with that, in the event that they're faced with an unfortunate situation. And so we do that with every briefing. And the feedback we got is that it's been, pretty helpful because, to Councilor Pelham's point, sometimes they don't know. But that's one of the things that we proactively make sure of is that legal aid is always available, and they're always at our briefings for that purpose.
Thank you. Councillor Gore, then Councillor Pelham.
I know we need to move on, but I just had this, I just remembered something, listening to Director Griffin. We did try, so I put on the agenda probably about a year and a half ago to look at how we can hold the bad landlords, slumlords accountable in the city. And we did do some research with our city attorney, and we thought maybe we could probably go through the business license aspect. If we could require landlords who hold multiple properties that are not a business to get a business license, then we can put regulations on their business license requirements to meet certain standards. And so that was the approach we thought we could take. And so we went to the city attorney to ask her if that was legal. Could we look into that? But if my memory serves it correct, and I asked Director Griffin to jump in, the law pretty much excludes specifically landlords from business license requirements. So there wasn't a way to do it through that angle. I mean, it explicitly gave them a carve out. And so I think we were left with like limited options to try to figure out how to do that. But if I remember correctly, the discussions was we can look at our code, our building code, and some other options there. And that was kind of where Ms. Griffin was looking at some of the zoning areas that we could revisit. So I just want to say for the record, we did look at trying to figure out how we can hold these landlords more accountable through a creative way. But when it came to the law, they were given explicit outs, so to speak. And is that kind of accurate, Ms. Griffin?
Yes, that's correct. That's right.
Yeah. So I'm gonna add that 2 cents.
Councillor Pelham.
I think she's muted.
People, would you say, Ms. Pay, attended your training as far as a percentage, like 10% of your group attended after the meetings you gave last year, 25, 50%? You have any idea?
So the way that those meetings work, they're specifically for folks who are being pulled off the waiting list to start their voucher issuance process.
Oh, okay.
And so it's a select group of folk, and typically we call in about anywhere from 10 to 20 folks off the waiting list at a time. So people who attend those briefings, have that class.
So none of the current people that live in housing get those classes, and I'm saying they need it as well. They can hold
right, and we actually
accountable as well as when they move on to choice vouchers, they will be able to have the knowledge base to know what they can put up with and what they don't have to.
Right. Another good question. So we do that for also for public housing. Around the same time, we started doing this presentation with legal aid for the housing choice voucher program briefings. We started the same group presentation with public housing right before COVID, and unfortunately, COVID dampened our efforts. We were able to get, I think, one session done, and I think that might have been with either Thomas Roth or Davisville. I have to go look at my records. And we did have some turnout, but I don't remember the turnout being very high. But we, of course, always put out flyers. and notify the residents when we have any events. But of course, the onus is on them taking responsibility to actually come to those sessions. We were going to do one for Piper Square last year, but again, unfortunately, COVID prevented us from doing that. So as soon as we're able, we'll pick those group sessions back up again with legal aid. But at this time, we're not doing that group sessions in the same way that we did them before.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Lewis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will ask my Madam Chair, and also you, Madam Mayor, can we extend just for a little while longer? We have stayed on this topic for quite a while, and we haven't even, we got a little more that we was trying to get through. Is that possible?
I can refer that to the attorney for special meetings. Ms. Robinson?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right, so you kind of agreed as a consensus to a 90-minute limit for this meeting. Council's rules are not offended or violated by a continuation of the meeting because council have a 3-hour limit. We have not approached the 3-hour deadline. And because we didn't give a hard, we didn't vote, number one, on a hard termination of the meeting or adjournment of the meeting, I think you can just keep going if there's a general consensus. And whenever someone's gotten to the point where they believe that you've exhausted the usefulness of the meeting, someone can just move to adjourn. And with a second and a vote in favor of that, you can adjourn.
Thank you.
Well, I guess I would leave the decision on behalf of the board. We'd have to hear from our board chair, but clearly the intent was to go 90 minutes with our understanding, and we entered this with our understanding that it was a 90-minute threshold, and that hopefully we were going to be guided, by that, and use our time to get through what we need to get through. And if we didn't get through all of the agenda, we're prepared to roll that over to either a future meeting or an information paper that would discuss it in the short term. But Commissioner Flowers, what is your desire for the board? That we continue, or?
I would like to poll my board if I could. I know Commissioner Lewis. Commissioner Johnson?
I am not opposed to continuing the meeting, but I will need to leave around 8.
Okay. Commissioner Bennett?
I don't think he's here.
I saw him on there earlier.
Oh, okay.
Commissioner Temple?
I don't oppose the meeting also, but I would have to leave around 8 also.
Okay. Vice Chair Tunstall?
Not opposed to continuing, but with people leaving, I think, and we established at the beginning that it was going to be an hour and a half. I would prefer to stick with what we established because, we have to be about our word.
And Commissioner Lewis, I'll let you speak. I don't want to. Commissioner Lewis? Commissioner Lewis?
Yes, Madam Chair. That is fine. what I was just expressing was that if we was going to stay where we was with the guidelines, then we didn't. So I think I would just ask going forward if this is what we're going to do, so we can get through the agenda. Then maybe we can do that, because that was just my concern. We didn't do it. So okay. So
All right.
I'm good with it, Madam Chair. Thank y'all.
Mr. Benham, polling the commissioners, we will stick to the 90 minutes, and we would do as we say. We would do a pending list and move these to the next meeting. Madam Mayor,
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess we are approaching the 90 minutes. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Make a motion, we adjourn the meeting.
Second. Motion's been made by Councilor Denton, seconded by Mayor Bennett. Ms. Bess, can you do a roll call, please?
Yes. Mayor Bennett,
Yes.
Councilor Randolph. I'm sorry, she's not here. I keep calling her name. Councilor Holloway.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Pardon,
Yes.
Councilor Gore,
Yes.
Councilor Denton,
Yes.
Councilor Pelham.
No.
Mayor Bennett, you have 5 yeses and 1 no.
All right, thank you. Meeting adjourned. Thank you to the chair and the commissioners, Ms. Flowers, and we will have this meeting again soon. And thank you, Mr. Benham and Mr. Marks and Ms. Pay.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night.
Good night, council. Good night, commissioners.
Good night.
Right.
Good night.
Bye-bye.